My son, your father is dying. You must come home.
Be a good man, Sam. Give your mother a life and children.
God's path isn't always straight, Samuel.
The job went bad. Blood on the floor. Had to stash it.
You have something that doesn't belong to you.
The sliver of light from the hallway widened, etching the silhouette of a man against the warm pattern of the wallpaper his mother loved. He was a blocky shadow, moving with a practiced, predatory silence that was far more terrifying than any noise. Samuel's breath hitched in his throat, a prayer half formed and instantly abandoned. His mother's room was just down the hall. The thought of her, fragile in her grief, jolted him into action. The weight of the wrench in his hand was no longer just metal. It was an extension of his fear, his rage, his duty. The intruder took a step inside, his head swiveling, scanning the dark living room. Samuel didn't think. He moved on an instinct he didn't know he possessed. As the man turned away from him, Samuel lunged, not with the wrench, but with his body, slamming the door shut with a force that shook the frame. The man spun, startled by the sudden noise. In the sliver of light, Samuel saw a face, hard and pockmarked, eyes wide with surprise that quickly morphed into cold anger. "Wrong apartment, friend," Samuel said, his voice a low growl that sounded nothing like his own. He raised the wrench, holding it like a crucifix before a vampire. The man let out a soft, ugly laugh. "Don't think so, kid." He took a step forward and a knife appeared in his hand, the blade catching a sliver of light. The box. Where is it? Samuel's mind raced. John's interested parties didn't waste time. They'd sent a collector. The diamond necklace wasn't just treasure, it was a target painted on his back. "Get out before I call the police," Samuel said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. The man's laugh was drier this time. "You won't dare." He took another step. The space between them was closing. Samuel could smell stale cigarettes and cheap cologne. It was the smell that did it. It was so utterly, banally evil. This wasn't a master criminal. This was a thug, a tool, and tools could be broken. As the man lunged, knife leading, Samuel sidestepped, his seminary-trained reflexes replaced by a raw, primal survival instinct. He brought the wrench down, not on the man's head, but on his wrist. There was a sickening crack, and the knife clattered to the floor. The man screamed, a short, guttural sound of pain and fury. Samuel didn't wait. He shoved him hard, sending him stumbling back into the hallway. He slammed the door shut, throwing the deadbolt and chain with trembling hands. He stood there, back against the wood, listening to the man's ragged curses fading as he retreated down the stairwell. "Samuel," his mother's voice, thin and frightened, came from her doorway. "What was that noise?" "Nothing, Ma," he said, forcing a calm he didn't feel into his voice. "Just dropped a tool. Go back to sleep." He waited until he heard a door click shut before he slid down to the floor, his head in his hands. The silence of the apartment was back, but it was different now. It was a silence he had violated. It was a silence that had been breached. He had brought violence into his father's house. The guilt was a fresh, hot brand. He couldn't go to the police. John's man would be long gone, and his story would sound insane, and it would put his mother directly in the crosshairs. They knew where he lived. He waited until dawn, sitting on the floor, staring at the space where the intruder had stood. When the first grey light filtered through the window, he moved. He pulled out the strongbox from his bed. He left the diamond and the journal. He took the bundled letters and the photograph. He needed to understand what he was holding. He needed to know the story behind the stone. At the library, using a computer terminal in a quiet corner, he started his search. The name Diamond Necklace yielded nothing. Eye of the Dawn Diamond was a dead end. He tried the date from the journal, April 12th, 1988. He scrolled through digitized archives of The Punch, society pages, financial news, sports, and then he found it. A small grim article from April 15th, 1988. Jeweler found slain in Upper East Side. Heist gone wrong. Benjamin Okafor, 58, proprietor of Ben & Sons Jewelers, was found dead in his shop last night. Police report signs of a struggle and a forced safe. The value of the stolen goods is estimated to be substantial, though an inventory is still pending. There are no suspects at this time. Benjamin Okafor, the old man, from the journal. Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the library's air conditioning. This was real. A man had died. He looked at the photograph he'd taken from the box. The laughing woman with dark eyes. On the back, in a faded script, was written, "My Lizzie, always laughing." He spent the next hour cross-referencing obituaries from 1988. He found her. Elizabeth Martin, died April 14th, 1988. Survivors include her husband, David Martin. A cold certainty settled over him. The journal writer had mentioned Matty was gone. Was David Martin Matty? Had the writer killed his own partner? Or had the they who found Matty also found Lizzie? He searched repeatedly and he found an address for David Martin, a nursing home in outskirts of the city. Samuel went that afternoon. The place smelled of antiseptic and boiled vegetables. David Martin was an old man in a wheelchair by a window, staring out at a parking lot. His gaze was dim and unexpressive, but they sharpened when Samuel mentioned Lizzie. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a papery whisper. "I found something," Samuel said carefully. "I think it might have belonged to you, or to someone you knew." He showed him the photograph. The old man's hands trembled as he took it. A tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. "Lizzie," he breathed. "They said it was a robbery. A random thing." Samuel handed him the bundle of letters. "They are love letters from you to Lizzie. Written before you married her, I guess." The old man clutched them to his chest, weeping silently. After a long time, he looked up, his gaze clear and terrifyingly intense. "The man who did it, his name was Leo. Leo Henshaw. He was my friend. He was the one who told me about the security system. He was the one who said it would be easy." The pieces snapped together with an almost audible click. The journal writer, Leo. He had set up his own friend. Something had gone wrong. Benjamin Okafor had fought back. Leo had killed him, then panicked. He'd taken the diamond necklace, the most valuable piece, and hidden it. "He killed my Lizzie," David whispered, his voice cracking with the grief that had fossilized but never faded. "She came by the shop that night. She saw everything. He killed her to silence her. They called it a random robbery, but I always knew. I always knew it was him." Samuel walked out of the nursing home. An hour later, the world tilting on its axis. He wasn't just holding stolen property. He was holding evidence from a double murder. And John Lucas's interested parties weren't just thieves. They were killers, tying up a 30-year-old loose end. He stood on the sidewalk, the traffic and cars roaring around him. He could run, take his mother and the diamond and disappear. He could go to the police and risk everything. Or he could do something else. He thought of his father's words, "Be a good man in the world." He thought of the silence of the seminary, a silence of peace. And he thought of the silence in David Martin's room, a silence of unimaginable loss. The duty his parents had given him was no longer just to family. It was to justice, a different kind of service. His own apartment felt like a sanctuary. As he closed the door, leaning against it to process the dark history he'd uncovered. But the sanctuary was violated instantly. On his kitchen table, placed neatly next to a vase of his mother's favorite silk flowers was a single crisp white envelope. His name was written on it in precise, elegant script. A cold dread seized him. He tore it open. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed his mother, Sarah, sitting in a stark wooden chair. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she was unharmed. Behind her, a man in a dark suit stood, his face obscured by shadow, but his hand rested on her shoulder, the message clear. Beneath the photo was a note, written in the same elegant hand. Mr. Oji, your mother is our guest. She is being treated with the utmost respect, which will continue upon the immediate and unconditional return of our property. The Eye of the Dawn. You will bring it to the abandoned Riverside warehouse at midnight. Come alone. Do not contact the authorities. The price of non-compliance is one you cannot afford. J. L. John Lucas. The suited monster had evolved from polite threats to outright war. And he had Samuel's mother. Panic, cold and absolute, threatened to drown him. He couldn't trust the police. John would be watching. He couldn't trust anyone. His eyes fell on the small wooden cross hanging on his wall. With trembling fingers, he picked up his phone and dialed the number he knew by heart. Father Franklin answered on the second ring. Samuel? My boy, is everything all right? No, Father, Samuel said, his voice clear and certain for the first time since he'd left. It's not, but I think it's going to be. I need your help, and I need to make a confession. He had a plan. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish, but it was the only path that felt right. The diamond necklace wasn't a curse. It was bait, and he was going to use it to finally close a 30-year-old wound. An hour later, in the back office of the quiet church, Samuel spilled everything. The diamond necklace, David's confession, the kidnapping. Father Franklin listened, his face growing graver with each word. This David, Father Franklin said slowly, his voice calm amidst the storm. His story, it was compelling. Heartbreaking, Samuel affirmed. A man who has had 30 years to practice a story can make it very compelling. The priest mused. Samuel, what if the story is a lie? The question hung in the air. What if David wasn't the victim, but the architect? What if the hired men were fiction to cover a much darker truth? It doesn't matter right now, Father Franklin said, cutting through the speculation. Your mother is what matters. We will get her back. We will use the diamond necklace as they ask, but we will not play by their rules. The plan was born from desperation and faith. Samuel would go to the warehouse, but he would not be alone. As midnight approached, Samuel stood before the looming dark shape of the Riverside warehouse, the diamond case heavy in his hand. In its pool of light, his mother was tied to a chair, her mouth gagged, her eyes terrified. Samuel, she cried, the gag muffling her voice. John Lucas stepped out of the shadows, a small, cruel smile on his lips. Mr. Orji, you have something for us. From the other side, the hulking form of the man who had attacked him in his apartment emerged, his wrist still in a cast, his eyes promising violence. Then a third figure moved from the deepest darkness behind his mother. He walked slowly. As he entered the light, Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It was David Martin. But the frail, broken man from the nursing home was gone. His posture was straighter, his eyes sharp and clear, gleaming with a cold, avaricious light. You, Samuel gasped. Me, David said, his voice strong and devoid of its previous tremor. You believe that pathetic story? The miserable husband? The tragic accident? He let out a dry, hollow laugh. Let me tell you what really happened that night. The Eye of the Dawn was to be my retirement, David narrated, his eyes glazing over with memory. Benjamin Okafor was a proud fool, too trusting. It was easy to plan the robbery. The men I hired were efficient. We were supposed to knock him out, clean out the safe, and leave. But Okafor fought back. One of them panicked, cut his throat. Lizzie, Samuel whispered. I loved her, he began, his voice a low, gravelly thing. I worked my hands to the bone for her. Came home every night smelling of grease and sweat. And for what? He paused, the bitterness fresh as yesterday. I knew something was wrong. The late nights. New dresses she couldn't explain. The way she'd smile at nothing. I found the photograph tucked in her jewelry box. My Lizzie, always laughing. His writing, Benjamin Okafor, the jeweler. The man with soft hands and a vault full of money. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I followed her one night. Saw her go into that fancy shop after hours. He let her in. I watched from the alley, through a crack in the blinds. I saw him put that very diamond necklace around her throat. She was laughing, the laugh she used to have for me. The humiliation was a fire in my gut. He hadn't just taken my wife, he'd made me a fool, a poor, pathetic fool. I didn't just want to hurt him. I wanted to take everything from him, just like he'd taken from me. I knew a guy who knew a guy, tough guys from the docks. They didn't ask questions if the money was right. I told them the safe combination was her birthday, the ultimate insult. Lizzie was supposed to be at her sister's, but she came to the shop to end it with him. She saw everything. She saw me there, directing them. I couldn't let her go. She knew I'd orchestrated it. My own wife chose him over me, and then I had no other option but to take her out. He paused, the memory raw. The men were spooked. They wanted out. They gave me the diamond necklace, but as they fled, they ran right into a police patrol. A shootout started. They were killed. The diamond was mine, but the plan was in ruins. I couldn't sell it. It was too hot. Every police in the city would be looking for it, so I hid it. I hid the evidence of Lizzie's affair, the letters, the photo from her lover. I walled my shame and my fortune away and became a ghost, waiting for the heat to die down. I've been waiting 30 years, and then you, a handyman, dug it up. Now, David said, snapping back to the present. The diamond. Samuel, his heart pounding, handed the case to John. John opened it, and the diamond glittering wickedly in the low light. He nodded to David. Excellent. A deal is a deal, David said. Then he nodded to the enforcer. Tie him up with his mother. You said you'd let us go, Samuel shouted as the large man roughly bound his hands behind his back and shoved him to the floor next to his mother's chair. I lied, David said simply. I can't have loose ends. Not again. He pulled a can of gasoline from the shadows and began splashing it around the warehouse. The acrid smell filled the air. As David and John moved towards the door, the enforcer tossed a lit match onto a gasoline trail. Fire roared to life, racing along the floor towards Samuel and his mother. Samuel, his hands tied to his back, rolled desperately, knocking over the can of gasoline near his mother, creating a brief gap between them and the advancing flames. Outside, the silent night erupted with activity. The warehouse doors were suddenly kicked open, not by David's crew, but by tactical police officers. Police! Freeze! David and John froze, stunned, the diamond case in John's hand. The enforcer went for his gun but was immediately subdued by two officers. From the police line, Father Franklin emerged, his face grim. He ran towards the flames where other officers were already pulling Samuel and his mother to safety, smothering the small fires on their clothes. Samuel, coughing from the smoke, looked back at David Martin. The old man was being shoved into a police car, his face a mask of not anger, but profound, weary defeat. The fortune he had waited 30 years to claim was now just evidence in a murder case, and the prison he would now enter would have real bars. At the hospital, as his mother was treated for smoke inhalation, Samuel looked at Father Franklin. You knew his story was a lie. I knew a story that practiced for 30 years would be too perfect, Father Franklin corrected gently. True guilt is messy. It's daughters. His was a smooth, rehearsed tragedy. I've heard enough real confessions to know the difference. Samuel nodded, taking his mother's hand. The path ahead was still uncertain, but the ghost of the past had finally been laid to rest. He had not found his calling in the quiet of the seminary, but in the fiery chaos of that warehouse, he had finally understood his father's words. He had become a good man in the world. And that was a different kind of prayer altogether. And that another page from the story library, your portal to endless stories. If you enjoy this chilling tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.